Welcome everyone to our first hybrid event of the semester at the Institute for the Study of Contemporary Antisemitism. I'm especially happy that 5 other IU units have co-sponsored this event, which I think shows broad interest in today's discussion. A big thank you to the Inner Asian and Uralic National Resource Center, the Institute for European Studies, the Russian and East European Institute, Religious Studies and Jewish Studies. My name is Günther Yekili, and I'll be moderating this event today. It's great to see so many of you here in person and also online. This, I think, is promising a good discussion that we're going to have. But first, let's get started with our speaker. Our guest today is Daniel Freitag. We are very lucky to have him here with us in Bloomington as a visiting scholar for a few months. At the end of the month, you'll be heading back to Germany, where you'll be finishing your PhD at the University of Münster. And you're also working as a research assistant at the Institute for Ethics and Related Social Sciences in the Faculty of Protestant Theology. So your academic journey has taken you to many countries, to Bloomington, but also to Israel, where you spent, I think, some days last year, but also in 2018, a longer time period. And your research focused on various manifestations of antisemitism in some of the major international Christian denominations, and particularly you're looking into how these groups engage with discussions about Jews in Israel on Facebook. That's your major focus. And today you'll be sharing some of the key findings with us from your PhD research. The talk's entitled Christian Antisemitism on Social Media, Russian Orthodox, Lutheran, and Catholic Narratives on Jews in Israel. Please join me in welcoming Daniel Freitag. Thank you. And for those online, the chat is disabled right now, but I will enable the chat at the end of the talk. Thank you.
Okay. So first, a big thank you that I can be here, and it's a big honor that I can spend some research months here in Bloomington at the Indiana University. So my research stay is coming to an end, and I want now to present some of my first results of my PhD project. And as Günther was already mentioning, it's Christian anti-Semitism on social media, and I'm mainly focusing on 3 churches. And my structure of this talk the structure of my talk will be 3 chapters. So first, I want to talk a bit what is theology doing in this field of research on anti-Semitism, and I want to explain a bit what my dissertation project is doing. Secondly, I want to talk about the Russian Orthodox Church and their narratives on Israel and Jews. And there I was looking at the Orthodox Christianity Facebook page. And third, I want to look on the Lutheran narratives. This is my domination where I'm belonging to. And I want to look at what their narratives about Jews in Israel are by looking on the Lutheran World Federation. So yeah, what is theological research on anti-Semitism doing? So we can ask provocatively a question. We research on modern online anti-Semitism in the connection with Christianity. Why? So yeah, it's easily to explain. We can see connection lines from the medieval times, the blood libels, for example. Here it's a painting from Bavaria. And we see the modern versions of this here connected to the Middle East conflict, that Israel and Jews want the blood of Palestinian children, and they're drinking the blood out of these cups. And yeah, so we easily understand there are connection lines. And so first, I want to give some examples of modern anti-Semitic conspiracy myths in Christianity to make it more clear what I'm talking about. So first, we have a statement from the year 2013, the Beirut Statement of the World Council of Churches. And this statement has some remarkable chapters. And for example, this is a problematic statement where they are mentioning and it was referring to the pro-Israeli Christians. make it possible the manipulation of public opinion by Zionist lobbies and harm relations within Christianity. So the Zionist lobbies are so powerful they can destroy Christianity from within. And another example is, for the beginning, a professor from my University of Heidelberg, where I was studying. He's now an old guy, but he was doing a lot of, I would say, anti-Israel propaganda in his teaching and talks. And he was connecting Israel a lot with his anti-capitalism approach by saying, for example, in this statement, Israel is one of the spearheads of the current phase of the global imperialist capitalist system. Within this logic, the Palestinians are not needed. This is the same thing we said about South African apartheid system in the 1980s. So these are some first examples to make it more clear why I'm talking about this topic in a Christian context. And we can see here directly, I would say, Israelization via this term Zionist Israel as a new semantic coding technique to cover anti-Semitism. This is a bit referring to Monika Schwarz-Friesel. And I also want to point out, this is a typical thing for me to personalize the world evil. Here, for example, with the second statement connected to capitalism, and to personalize this worldwide evil to the Jews in Israel, and the Jews in Israel are the puppet master behind the capitalism, and therefore we can also connect it, for example, with the theory of Klaus Holtz, the figure of the third, that the Jews are so powerful they can undermine communities, the world structures, etc. This is also a bit linked to the first statement that Zionist lobbies are able to destroy Christianity from within. So another example is more for the Russian context, because we are also talking today a lot about Russian church and the Russian Federation, etc. So there's a modern anti-Semitic conspiracy myth spread again by, for example, the Bishop Tikhon. He's considered to be one of the confessor or spiritual fathers of President Putin. So he's really close to Putin, as you can see also in the picture at the right corner. And he was, for example, doing the statement in the year 2017 by saying in the context of a new committee which was investigating on the execution of the Tsarist family in 1918, that this murder of the family was a ritual murder, and we have to take this theory of a ritual murder into account when this committee is making the inquiry into the execution of the Tsarist family. And this was not a miraculous thing, because this was getting support by Marina Molzova. She was a senior investigator of this committee. And she was also saying, yeah, we are doing this because we're not only doing an empirical, historical investigation, we are doing a psycho-historical investigation, whatever this means. And therefore, we have to take into account this ritual murder thesis, which is so important for parts of the Russian Orthodox Church. And it's not surprisingly that the Federation of Jewish Committees in Russia were deeply shocked, and they are putting out some statement that they are condemning these kind of theories. And for example, the spokesman of the Jewish committee in Russia was saying this is absolutely unacceptable, and this is absurd. And he was also saying to Haaretz that the murderers of Nicholas II were committed atheists because they are Bolshevik soldiers, and they're rejecting not only the Christian belief, they're rejecting any belief except their own. So he was trying to make the remarks that, yeah, we Jews and Christian, we have something in common, we are believing in a God. Why are you not seeing this in the Russian church? Why are you putting us Jews together with the Bolshevists? So these were some first examples I want to mention. So now I'm coming a bit more to a broader understanding what anti-Semitism research is doing for me. And there were, for me, it was really interesting what Christoph Hoffmann was saying from Norway. He was making making like two lines in the research up, that we have approach mainly coming from a perspective of political, social, historical perspective and therefore focusing on political, social, economic factors and contexts to explain anti-Semitism. And often the modern anti-Semitism is then appeared in the 19th centuries, in the 80s, 70s. But he was pointing out that these approaches often missing and tend to ignore the religion and also the culture, ideas, ideological factors in the history of anti-Semitism. And on the other hand, we have an approach which is including this history of ideas, the mentalities, the cultural patterns, and it's trying to understand which cultural patterns of interpretation, of mentalities, of images, of myths we have when we talk about anti-Semitism. And therefore, this approach is often looking more on the lines of continuity. And this is for me, as I'm a Protestant theologian, really important to look on these religious lines, on these theological ideas we have in the antique time, in the medieval time, but also in the modern time. So the second approach is a bit more linked to my research. But I found it really interesting that he is saying we have to integrate both. So we cannot say the one approach is completely more better and another approach is not good. So we have to understand, when we want to understand the whole anti-Semitism thing, we have to include the history of ideas, of religious traditions, in combination with the social, economic, and political factors. And what are we doing now in a theological research on anti-Semitism? This is often a question I'm getting, and therefore I want to make some remarks on this. So, for example, for the Protestant and Catholic field, there are two big guys who are doing a lot of research, Stegemann for the Protestant field or Kampling for the Catholic field. And they were saying we have like two ways on focusing on anti-Semitism. First, by a historical reconstruction of the roots of Christian hostility towards Jews, from the New Testament through the whole church history, what we can see there. And another perspective is like, in, I would say, more normative and reflective way, to make a critique on the continuity and the transformation processes we have in the tradition of anti-Jewish Christian hate, and how we can overcome this by new theologies. And often one of the big fights in this research field is, and it's a bit linked to the slide before, is the Christian hate we have towards Jews an expression of a real political, economy, social conflict? This is what I would say more functionalistic explanation. Or is this Christian hate a substantial part of an image of Jews and the Christian identity itself? This is more a substantialist explanation. And the problem, I would say, is from the beginning of the 19th century, when we are looking to the field of the modern anti-Semitism, that the theology was changing due to this modern science and historicism, etc. So they were trying to answer to the fact that this historicism was criticizing the universal truths of Christian revelation, of Christian salvation. So there was a big pressure on the old theology, how we can overcome this new modern science. But the problem was, I would say that the Christian Enlightenment theology, this is like a modern approach of theology, which was also a big thing in German Protestantism, had also the weakness to say, we are now building up a new understanding of Christianity as a modern and universal and normative religion, and we are trying to overcome this old dogmatics. But also in this more reflected approach, I would say, we are also seeing that Judaism is not integrated to the new understanding. So Judaism is still a pre-modern, a particular religion. So also in Schleiermacher and all these modern theologians, we can see this problem. They are not really good in understanding Judaism. They are not reflecting the anti-Jewish stereotypes. So still there's a problem. And so my whole research project is also linked to these debates of a new anti-Semitism. And there are some research really important for me, Monika Schwarz-Fresel again and Yehuda Reinhardt. who are making the point that we have a qualitative and quantitative change when it comes to this new anti-Semitism. And they are referring to some other researchers by saying, yeah, the Middle East conflict and the state of Israel, these are some of the central issues we have when we are talking about the new anti-Semitism. And also they are referring to some other researchers by saying, yeah, we have also a new global interconnection of European and Arab anti-Semitism beside the old religious and racist anti-Semitism, in this new way of this murderous anti-Semitism by Islamists, which is getting a moral justification by Western intellectuals. We could see this since October 7th a lot. And yeah, some of the 4 visible changes they are making up, and this is important for my research, is like Israel is in the center of this new current global anti-Semitism. We have a new quality of verbal violence through the easy access and widespread disputation over the internet and social media. Therefore, I'm focusing on social media. And we have also often in Germany, and I'm from Germany, a one-sided focus when we are talking about anti-Semitism, because we are often putting it into the past. So we are saying we have a historical anti-Semitism, and the anti-Semitism is only on the extreme edges and not in the main center of our society. And therefore, I want to put my eye on the contemporary anti-Semitism and also in the center of our society by looking in like normal churches, so not crazy churches. And yeah, the 4th thing is like we have a big gap between the perspective of Jewish victims and their stories and the researcher warnings versus the perspective of the majority. This is also a problem in Germany because this majority often sees itself as morally secure after a collective learning process. So I'm also getting often the rejection like, Daniel, what are you doing? We have already learned everything. Yeah, therefore, my first question when I was starting this whole project were, yeah, okay, why we have this new increase and this radicalization when we are talking about anti-Semitism in the 21st century? And what role do these conspiracy myths and religious and ideological narratives play, which have become so visible since 9/11, or also when we are looking on social media and like want to inform ourselves about the Middle East conflict? And yeah, what forms of anti-Semitism and what forms on conspiracy myths can I see when I'm looking on social media, but for me, like on Christian Facebook pages? And fourth, this is like linking to the slide before. To what extent is anti-Zionism and anti-Israelism the unifying element of a modern anti-Semitism and the spread of anti-Jewish myths and hate, such as the Jewish world conspiracy to explain human suffering or the cause of the Middle East conflict? So yeah, some facts about my project now. And I was exploring the contemporary anti-Semitism on social media and its interrelated history and global debates. And my focus is like, okay, I'm looking on empirical results, but can my empirical results be linked to these big theories from researchers like anti-Semitism is an anti-modern movement, anti-Semitism is a cultural code, anti-Semitism is a ethnocentric nationalism, or anti-Semitism is a global transnational anti-Semitism. So in which way can my empirical results be explained by these broader theories? Yeah, and I also have a modern background idea in the way to say scientific enlightenment through the ideological critical decoding and reconstruction of anti-Semitic narratives and the theological self-criticism and reflection makes an important contribution to combating anti-Semitism and rising sensitivity in Christian context. So this is my background idea. Yeah, and my method, it's a pretty normal one. It's a qualitative content analysis. And I was using also a computer software called MaxQDR. And I was focusing on anti-Semitism on social media in 4 specific time periods from 2012 to 2021. And I have a comparative approach in the sense that I was comparing the narrative of these three churches, the Russian Orthodox, the Roman Catholic, and the Lutheran Church. Yeah, and now I want to start with some remarks and some findings, results I was getting already. So when we're looking on the Russian Orthodox narratives, I was making my research on the page Orthodox Christianity. And the Orthodox Christianity Facebook page is linked to this internet website, Pravoslavi. And Pravoslavi was opened with the blessing of Patriarch Alexei II of Moscow and all Russia in the late 90s. And the editor-in-chief of this website, since its foundation, is Metropolitan Tikhon. And as you maybe remember from my first example, Tikhon is this trusted advisor, the spiritual father to Putin. So he's a big guy in the Russian Orthodox Church. And the Russian Orthodox Church, some facts about this, is Autokephilius Orthodox Church of the Byzantine Rite. It's the largest Orthodox church we have on this planet, with around about 100 million members. And in my investigation period, there was a growing, when I was looking on the followers, from 0 to 96 followers.
96,000.
96,000, yeah. And I have to say that this is an English-speaking Facebook page. So it's also trying to cover up the followers around the world, so not only the Russian-speaking followers. And some facts about the Metropolitan Tikhon. He's a really influential bishop in the Russian Orthodox Church. You can see the picture beside. He was doing a lot of cultural work. He was bringing up a documentary about the fall of the Byzantine Empire and the lesson we have to learn out of this. He was a member of the Cultural Council of the Russian Federation. He's since 2011 a member of the Supreme Council. He was writing a bestseller book, and this is also really critical. He is since 2023 the new bishop of the Crimean Peninsula, and he's replacing pretty harsh, unwanted pro-Ukrainian priests on this peninsula with priests who are loyal to the Russian Federation. Okay, so some examples now. As you could see in my abstract on before this event, one of the most surprisingly results was for me, we have still some rumors and some posts in connection of this old myth that Jewish people are building up an alliance with the communist Bolshevism. For example, they were posting in my first investigation period an old interview with Patriarch Tikhon. It's another Patriarch Tikhon, same name, but different guy. And he was the first patriarch in 1917, in this whole trouble of years when the Tsarist Empire was falling down and the civil war was happening. And there was also a persecution by the Bolsheviks towards him. And therefore, in the 90s, he was getting a sanct, there was a sanctification by the Russian Orthodox Church. So he's now in the tradition of the Russian Orthodox Church, a very important figure. And in this post, there were like these descriptions of saying, yeah, the Jews were in this critical period where the Tsarist Empire was falling down, playing the alliance, were playing together with the communist Bolsheviks by persecuting the Christian faith, the Orthodox Church. And you were saying, for example, a story where a Jewess was attacking the Christian stories about the miraculous birth of Jesus, about the background of Mary, etc. And he wants to point out that the attacks against the Orthodox faith in this critical time of in the end of the Tsarist Empire, there was a connection between Jews and Bolshevism, because both were attacking the Christian faith. And there's also this old dual view against Jews. They were the chosen people, but now they are the punished people, because he was saying, yeah, they betrayed not only the faith of the fathers in the Old Testament, they are also have to be punished by God because they're not believing in the only begotten Son of God. So this is the explanation why they have to suffer. Another problem was for me often the whole conflict with the new Orthodox Church of Ukraine. So some background here. We have a church crisis in Ukraine because we have a new Orthodox Church of Ukraine, which was created by a fusion of some other churches of Ukraine. I'm not going into this. In the end of 2018. And this was causing a big trouble in the Orthodox world, because now we have a split, because some Orthodox churches are accepting this and some don't. And here we can see the big guys who are fighting. The picture below is Patriarch Kirill I of Russia, and the picture above is Patriarch Bartholomew I of Constantinople. And Patriarch Bartholomew I, who was accepting and was giving the official signature for this new church, is the biggest enemy now for the Russian Orthodox Church. And therefore, they are spreading a lot of posts and I would say conspiracy narratives, which are also can be correlated to anti-Semitism, to demonize this Patriarch Bartholomew I of Constantinople. Here we can see a table where I was making the split up between the churches who are accepting this new Orthodox Church of Ukraine on the left, and the churches who are deeply rejecting this new Orthodox Church of Ukraine, where mainly the Russian Orthodox Church is the biggest one, but also the old Antiochian Church is one who is deeply rejecting this new church. And yeah, it's not a surprise, the Antiochian Orthodox Church is in Syria. And yeah, so they are often posting conspiracy theories and narratives to demonize the decision of Patriarch Bartholomew of Constantinople by saying, for example, he's betraying the Orthodox dogmatics, Orthodox principles, because he's meeting with the Catholic Pope, he's meeting with Protestants, etc. So he's working together too much with other Christian denominations, and therefore he's betraying us. But they're also spreading the myth that this Patriarch of Constantinople, yeah, he is meeting with representatives of Masonic and secret orders. And therefore, he's maybe an agent of this Masonic and secret orders, and therefore he wants to destroy the Orthodox faith from within. And another problem is, for example, that there are a lot of rumors about this new Orthodox Church of Ukraine, because some of the private commentators were often asking, okay, this new Orthodox Church we have in Ukraine, which guys were behind it? And some of the private commentators were often saying, yeah, it should be the Americans, it should be the Israelis, etc. So these governments were building up this new Ukrainian church to destroy the Russian Orthodox Church. But it was interesting that in the third investigation period, they were trying to refocus these rumors by saying, no, it's not only the American Israeli governments. We have a new narrative. This narrative is saying the most dangerous actors we have are the Democrats. And the Democrats were building up this new Ukrainian church. And there were like a lot of posts about Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, etc. And they have the aim to destroy the Orthodox world, Orthodox churches, by building up this new schismatic church of Ukraine. And this can be easily explained because these posts by the Russian Orthodox page were brought up in the time where the Kremlin government was bringing up a big disinformation campaign during the American election campaigns 2016 and 20. And in this disinformation campaigns, they were really trying to demonize the frontrunners Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden. So in this sense, the Orthodox Church is also a way of putting this disinformation out in the global world. Yeah, so how we can explain these results, I was seeing there's a historian from my home university in Münster who was doing a lot of research on the Russian Orthodox Church and their relations to Judaism and anti-Semitism. And he's saying it's a bit hard to give a broad answer to this. We have to understand there are different levels: bishop, priest, lay people, liberal movement, conservative movements. They have all a different approach when it comes to Judaism. But we can say, if we want to give a broader answer, the historical anti-Judaism was mainly coming by the adoption of the anti-Jewish Christian tradition from Byzantium. So the Christ killer narrative, etc., this is all coming from the Byzantine Empire. And the integration of Jews into Russia was mainly because of the partition of Poland in the 18th century. Therefore, the Jews were becoming part of the Russian Empire. And a big thing for the modern times are the pogroms. I think we all know them. The anti-Semitic agitation led to bloody riots in Kiev, Odessa, etc. in the late 19th century, in the beginning of the 20th century. And we now know, because of many research, that the leadership of the Orthodox State Church in Russia really failed to officially speak out against pogroms and anti-Semitism. When we look deeper, we can often see that these anti-Semitic riots were more led by local church members and the lower clergy, and the higher clergy was often saying nothing. They were not speaking against it, but they were saying nothing. We have some exceptions, for example, the Metropolitan Antony of St. Petersburg or the Metropolitan Maccareus of Moscow, who strongly condemned these anti-Jewish pogroms, but without any big effect. And another big thing I want to mention here are the protocols of the Elder of Zion. We all know this, but they are also connected to the Orthodox Church. So in the end of the Tsarist Empire, because a lot of people were seeing and feeling that the Tsarist Empire is failing and it will disappear, in the Orthodox Church circles, there were a lot of rumors and theories that this is the end of time, and therefore the coming of Christ, of the Antichrist, is maybe the next thing. And there is Sergei Nilus, a big figure. He was an apocalyptic, mystical thinker within the Orthodox Church. And he was writing a lot of stuff about this coming of the Antichrist and this end times of the Tsarist Empire. And he was also editing to his writings the protocols of the Elder of Zion. So he was a big guy in promoting these protocols of the Elder of Zion. And he was often saying it's not a pamphlet against Judaism. It's only an explanation about the world. But in the Russian Orthodox circles, it was read by a pamphlet against Judaism. And we have to understand, after the Soviet Empire was failing and was disappearing, ultra-Orthodox monks and national circles are putting up this protocols of the Elder of Zion in the 90s again. So they were editing it again, they were selling it again in the 90s. And another thing is important that we see now in the Ukrainian war, that the Russian propaganda is using the fight against Nazism to justify Russia's special military operation as a denazification of Ukraine. They're often saying Jewish individuals are only using their Jewish identity to gain support from Western countries, from Jewish communities. They're often trying to put a connection between Zelensky and extremist national movements in Ukraine to discredit him. And we also see on an ideological level, I would say, this new Neo-Eurasianism, which is represented by the state philosopher Alexander Dugin. And this is an ideological thing to say we have to emphasize on the preserving cultural identity of Russia against the multiculturalism, the globalization of the West. So Russia is presented in this ideological, metaphysical endgame with the decadent artificial West, and Russia is a socially and morally healthy, eternal entity. And this is often also linked to the Orthodox Church. because Russia is a social and moral healthy entity, because the Russian culture is rooted and built up on the Orthodox values. And another topic we also heard the talk of Jaron Gamburg is that we have a change when we are analyzing Putin's rhetoric and speeches, because in his first years he was really tolerant when he was meeting with Jewish communities and when he was talking about Judaism. But now we see more and more he is legitimizing anti-Semitic statements. And we have, as I already put it out, instrumentation in the Ukraine war, that anti-Semitic tropes are used to discredit political opponents. And we have a return to Soviet patterns in the way that anti-Semitism is again used to manipulate public opinion, to promote nationalist ideologies. And therefore, anti-Semitism is a tool for influence operations, disinformation campaigns against Western countries. And this is crystal clear also for my empirical results of the Russian Orthodox Church. When they are talking about anti-Semitism, about Jews, it's often linked to this anti-Western hate, to the hate against Western societies and also against Western churches, etc. So this is one side I want to explain. Another side is the Lutheran World Federation and some narratives here. I'm only making this a bit shorter. The Lutheran World Federation is a global union of churches, mainly from the mainline Protestant backgrounds. And the head base of these churches, of this global union, is in Geneva. It was founded in 1947 in Sweden. There are around about 150 member churches from 99 countries. Approximately, they are representing 78 million Lutherans worldwide. And there was a growth when I was looking on the follower numbers from 0 to 25,000. And a big figure compared to Tikkun for the Russian Orthodox Church is here Munib Yunan. And he is a Palestinian Christian. He was the third bishop of a Lutheran Arab Church. And the Lutheran Arab Church is responsible for the area of Jordan and the Holy Land. And he was also the president of the Lutheran World Federation in the years 2010 to 2017. And this is in my research period. And he was really committed to the Christian, Muslim, Jewish dialogue, to this trialogue, maybe you can say. And he was making a lot of statements. He was pushing a lot of statements from this Lutheran World Federation when they were talking about the Middle East and the Middle East conflict. We have to criticize him directly because there was a controversial declaration in the year 2009, the Kairos-Palestine Declaration. And this Kairos-Palestine Declaration was wrote by many Arab Middle East pastor, theologians, and also the Palestinian pastor Mitri Raheb, but also from Munib Yunan. He was later saying he was not in this writing circle and he wants to take his signature back. But first, in the first appearance of this document, his signature was under this Kairos-Palestine document. And in this document, we see a lot of controversial explanation when they are talking about Middle East and Israel. For example, this document was saying the roots of terrorism are in the human injustice committed and in the evil of the occupation. So the terrorism by Islamists and Palestinian terrorists are there because of Israel and not of the anti-Semitism and Islamist movements in Palestine. And therefore, this document was also calling for a system of economic sanctions and boycott to be applied against Israel. So this was a document which was deeply spread by the World Council of Churches, but was also discussed within the Lutheran World Federation. And there we often see the Palestinians are discussed as the indigenous people of the Holy Land. And therefore, there are a lot of rumors that the Israel government wants to destroy these holy sites of the Muslims or of the Christians. And there were like also this connection. Palestinians are the indigenous victims, and Israel in this post-colonial pattern of thinking is a neo-colonial perpetrator. So this is the normative interpretation framing, I would say, which I was seeing in my investigation periods a lot. Another point is that there is a Protestant pastor from the West Bank, Munter Isaac. And this is a pretty popular guy now because you can see the picture. He was giving, for example, many interviews to CNN, but also to Tucker Carlson last year. And he's spreading a lot of lies and I would say anti-Zionist, anti-Israel conspiracy narratives when he is trying to explain the Middle East conflict and the causes behind this conflict. And it's interesting that he is one of the key writers of a Lutheran World Federation publication in the year 2019, where they want to address new radicalizations and populism, etc. around the world. They're not talking about anti-Semitism in a big thing. They have one chapter where they're addressing Israel, and this one chapter where they were addressing Israel was written by Munter Isaac, and his whole explanation is like this conflict is there because we have a colonial Zionism, and the colonial Zionism is in the hands of Israel, and therefore Israel is so evil, is not accepting Palestinians, they are neglecting the Palestinian existence, etc. So this is for me pretty remarkable that this figure who was talking with Tucker Carlson was getting a chapter in a Lutheran World Federation publication. Yeah, so he is often delegitimizing Israel. He's discrediting also anti-Semitism critical analysis by saying this anti-Semitism critical analysis is only an empirical projection mechanism of extremist American and Israeli actors to project their theology of empire. And theology of empire is a term of him to say theology of empire is Zionism. Christian and Jewish Zionism is a theology of empire. So we can see here crystal clear this post-colonial background of thinking of him in addressing the Middle East conflict. So yeah, there were also some researchers explaining this new shift in the mainline Protestantism and also in the Lutheran World Federation by saying in the 80s and 90s, there was a big sensitivity to reflect in a critical way the Christian heritage and anti-Semitism towards anti-Semitism. And there were a lot of statements by the Lutheran World Federation by condemning Lutherans, Martin Luther's anti-Semitism or the contemporary anti-Semitism, the Christian anti-Semitism, etc. But we can see, and this was really clear for my research, that this is changing in the 2010s, not only on this worldwide level of Lutheran World Federation, also on maybe the American church level, because there are more and more anti-Israel resolutions. And this anti-Israel resolution in this Christian church context are often really one-sided. So they are not good in seeing both sides, as they often try to mind to do, because often they're just seeing the Palestinian side, but only also a Palestinian side in this really anti-Israel post-colonial background. And therefore, there are like key resolutions to end US aid to Israel or to divest from Israel. And yeah, so there's a big, I would say, anti-Israel network nowadays more and more in the World Federation of Lutheranism, because the Arab Lutheran Church is connected to other anti-Israel organizations in America or also in Germany, and they are trying to spread this pro-Palestinian approach by saying this is a Palestinian liberation theology. And this Palestinian liberation theology is the explanation why we need now this new theology. But I would say this Palestinian liberation theology is backdoor, a progressive backdoor to a return of a Christian anti-Semitism, and therefore we have to criticize this. And now I'm finished, and I want to thank you all for listening.